This is a detailed endgame guide of my Minion Infernalist, in which I will cover everything about the build in Soul Self-Found. You can play it in trade, of course, it will be even stronger there. There's a path of building that I created, a written mobalytics guide, and of course timestamps. My Infernalist build is a summoner leveraging all the fire synergy I could muster while building a strong army to do the heavy lifting for you. Let me give you a short overview, you can see the footage as well as you listen to this. I've reached level 96, I have a ridiculous number of hours on this character because it's basically all I've been playing since launch. I'm at almost 300 hours played and I killed over 1 million monsters. It's safe to say I have a pretty decent understanding of the build as the vast majority was spent in endgame. In Soul Self-Found I got all my main Atlas points with this build without any issues. I also got all the Breach Atlas points, although killing the most difficult level Xesht is not possible on this character despite the gear. The prime reason is because I don't kill the trash monsters fast enough so the timer runs out. I think I could kill the boss, it's just that I never get there. I've completed all expeditions, including the boss on the hardest difficulty. I've killed the Arbiter of Ash as well, just once, because I couldn't find any other citadels. This was before the patch, and that's roughly what the build can do. It scales well, but compared to some of the broken builds out there, it is just good. Which in a way is an advantage, because that means this build is likely around in the next couple of leagues. I'm expecting Grim Feast to get nerfed a bit, but other than that I don't see anything that is super broken, so I expect this build to be working for a significant number of leagues. Now that you have some idea about the build in general, let's look at the pros and cons, starting with the pros. 1. Apart from a somewhat rough start in the campaign, the build scales well with only a few stats and is rather easy to gear, making it great for SSF. 2. A summoner playstyle allows you to focus on the boss mechanics, loot gear, and just enjoy the scenery PoE 2 has to offer while your minions are doing the work. 3. It's SSF friendly, as I am an SSF player, because it is so easy to gear. This makes this build a great league starter. 4. It's quite a tanky build, especially once you swap to Chaos Inoculation. It has massive quality of life too, at the cost of offense. 5. This is a very extensive guide, which I think is a pro. There is a path of building, including several leveling trees and loadouts for every stage of the build, a mobalytics written guide and a leveling guide, which is its own video. Then some cons. 1. The start of the campaign is rough. I suppose that's true for quite a few builds, but you are reliant on gear to skill the minions early on. Getting a +2 minion level on gear is a huge upgrade, as well as some spirit. Not getting that, however, means you're doing half the damage. Your minions tend to die a lot at the start as well. 2. The build is quite slow. The minions clear well, but you're moving slowly. There is no movement speed on the tree, and I'm not really a fan of using movement skills so far. I did put in shield charge for your convenience, but that's only if you like it. I don't use it much. 3. The minion AI is still pretty bad. They're body blocking each other in smaller spaces. They don't necessarily respond well to commands. It's fine most of the time, but when you are in a map with a bunch of small rooms, it can feel pretty bad. 4. Visual clarity. All the fire explosions completely obscure the vision, especially of ground effects, making it very hard to see sometimes what the enemies are doing or casting. This can be a real issue. Let's talk about the various skills and support gems used in the endgame, starting with our main skills, our main damage skills. First, there's the Arsonist, which is a skeletal revivable minion that throws fire bombs. These fire bombs are projectiles and they have an explosion area. We use Flame Wall for synergy because if your minions throw projectiles through the Flame Wall, it adds flat added fire damage, significantly increasing the DPS of Arsonists. The Arsonists are supported by Scattershot because all 3 projectiles can shotgun, I'm pretty sure, and it's great for clear as well. Elemental Focus for 25% more damage. The downside doesn't matter because we don't need Arsonists to ignite. Immolate for 30% more damage against ignited targets. Martial Tempo for more attack speed. And finally, Concentrated Effect. Before Conk Effect I used Fire Infusion, but after the POB came out, Conk Effect was much more DPS. It does reduce the AoE effect from the firebomb explosion, but I found that the clear speed didn't suffer much at all, while the DPS was significantly better on single targets, so I'm keeping it in. Second, there's Raging Spirits, which is a buff, and they're also damage oriented, summoned by using a fire spell, and in our case that is the Flame Wall. They're automatically seeking enemies, and we're supporting them with Execute for 40% more damage against enemies on low life, which is less than 35% life. Feeding Frenzy for 30% more damage. It doesn't matter much they take more damage, as you are constantly summoning new ones. Fire Mastery and Minion Mastery, as minion levels are really good, increasing all of the minion stats, including accuracy and base damage. And finally, Fire Infusion. Both skills are enhanced or made possible by Flame Wall, which I left on a 4 link in the endgame for CI, Chaos Inoculation, and it is a 5 link on the life-based build before you swap to CI. Flame Wall is a wall of flames which ignites enemies, and it is supported by Arcane Tempo for cast speed, as you cast this all the time. Then Fortress, so it spawns in a circle, making it easier to place, because you cast it around enemies and then any firebomb from the arsonists always gets the added flat fire damage. And Mobility, so you don't get slowed down too much when moving and casting Flame Wall, which is effectively all you're doing with this build. If you're still using life and mana, Arcane Surge is a good 5 link to use, providing you with a steady flow of mana. Then we get onto our supporting skills, starting with the Infernal Hound, which you get from your first Ascendancy. It's a minion that burns and ignites enemies around it, plus it mitigates 20% of the damage you would otherwise take, when it's alive, that is. It gets links as you level up, with the final 6 link becoming available at level 90. It is supported by Meat Shield because you want it to be alive, Strip Away and Fire Exposure for a lot of fire exposure on enemies. By default this is 20%, and with Strip Away it's 26%, meaning that any fire attacks such as the Raging Spirits and Arsonists that they use negate 25% fire resistance. Exposure can in theory negate all fire resistance on a monster, but it can never go below 0 fire resistance. Then we slot in Wildfire, spreading the ignites. And finally, just for fun, I'm not even sure this works, but it should, it is Fiery Death, to make enemies explode if they die while ignited. In theory, yeah, that should happen a lot, but because you can't see shit with this build, it's really hard to tell if enemies indeed explode. Our second support gem is Flammability, which is on a 5 link on the Chaos Inoculation version and just on a 4 link on the life-based version. The CI version doesn't use mana, so it doesn't matter that the skill costs around 800 mana to cast. In the life-based build it is only on a 4 link and it has inspiration because of those mana costs. In CI, Flammability is supported by Heightened Curse for curse effect, Persistence, so it lasts longer, Focused Curse, so there's less of a delay before the curse is cast, and Spell Cascade, significantly increasing the curse area, making it great for monsters that run around a lot. Contrary to Exposure, which can't go below 0 resistance, curses like Flammability can reduce the enemy fire resistance below 0. Together with the 26% exposure plus a 68% fire resistance reduction, you're at a total of minus 94% fire resistance, which is of course very significant. A Guardian or Pinnacle boss, according to Path of Building, has 50% fire resistance, so you would bring that to minus 44 fire resistance. If you're wondering how I'm getting a curse of 68% flammability, take a look at the passive tree weapon swapping in the final tree. Our third support skill is Pain Offering, where you offer a minion, ideally one of the 2 skeletons created by a Rattling Scepter, to get a buff that provides 30% increased attack and cast speed and 52% more minion damage. A massive multiplier, clearly. We're supporting this with Expanse for bigger coverage, the drawback doesn't matter as the cooldown doesn't apply, Magnified Effect for even more AoE, Fond of Rage for rage generation, increasing attack speed even more of minions, Fond of Blood to keep your minions a bit healthier, it doesn't do anything for us because we're CI and I have 1 life, and Ablation for increased buff effect at the cost of life, which doesn't matter because we have no life. Then all that's left is to quickly talk about the 2 skeletal warriors from the Rattling Scepter, which don't do any damage really, but it can be supported, and I'm putting Maim, Culling Strike, Blind and Heavy Swing on them. All those status effects, including the Culling Strike, primarily work well on bosses. In mapping you won't see much effect, as you are bone offering your skeletons quite a lot. Finally, we have one more buff, which is Grim Feast, a very strong buff for only 30 spirit, which effectively doubles our energy shield in maps. Also, by picking up the small light blue orbs, you recover a lot of energy shield. This is a prime candidate for a nerf, but depending on the nerf, you can entirely skip it and take Minion instead, or keep it in case it's still somewhat useful. For now, it's more than useful, it's absolutely amazing, but next league is probably going to get destroyed. Then it's time for the progression of the build, using all the loadouts in Path of Building. If you check the loadouts in the top right, you see Act 1 to Act 6, meaning the regular and cruel versions of Act 1 to 3. This serves as a leveling guide and it is for your convenience. I've already made a video about this part of the build, so we're skipping that for this particular video, but it is in the POB. Then there is a loadout for the 3rd Ascendancy, which does a small respec from the campaign tree, giving you a lot more energy shield and some optimized pathing, as respecking only costs gold, and not even that much. This is not a big deal at all. There's a level 85 loadout where you are still on your 3rd Ascendancy and you are still life-based, meaning you haven't swapped to Chaos Inoculation yet. Then there is another loadout for the 4th Ascendancy, including the CI swap. And finally, the final endgame loadout with my actual character, including all the gear and the different trees to be used when you are weapon swapping. The final build, if you will. I'm going to take you through the passive tree and the gear step by step. For the 3rd Ascendancy, we're taking Beda's Will, which provides quite a bit of extra spirit, around 50 or so. That is 1 or 2 more arsonists, and it's a big step in the build. The tree is focused on energy shield, minion stats, and I still use the Fear of Death notable because minion accuracy at this level is very important. Minion levels provide base accuracy to minions, but as long as they are lower level, you need this node to make them hit 100% of the time. As there's pretty much no life on the passive tree, we invest into energy shield. The moment you get your 4th Ascendancy, which I did very late at level 95, I chose to swap the CI pretty much after I finished the trial, so I'm combining the 4th Ascendancy with the CI swap. I personally wouldn't recommend swapping to CI too early on, because I think you're just gonna lack points and it's gonna be, I think, a bit of a disaster, but hey, feel free to try. So let's first cover the main differences in the Chaos Inoculation swap or the CI swap compared to life-based. First, there are the Ascendancy nodes, Pyromantic Pact, which replaces your mana with Infernal Flame, effectively removing all mana costs from spells. It's a huge quality of life feature. Second, we take Chaos Inoculation, which sets your life to 1 and makes you immune to chaos damage, which is another huge quality of life feature because a lot of on-death effects are chaos damage, which now you are immune to, and a lot of league mechanics spawn chaos damage, which you are now immune to. And you don't need chaos resistance on your gear anymore, which frees up a bunch of gear pressure. Third, we're taking the Eternal Youth Keystone, which stops energy shield recharge and lets you use your life flasks to recover energy shield. This gives you control over energy shield. You don't need to invest in energy shield recharge or recovery rate, and if you don't manage your flasks well, you will die, especially on bosses. For mapping, this is amazing, this deck, but bosses can be a bit trickier. However, regular energy shield doesn't recharge after taking damage, and on bosses that may happen a lot, so I still prefer this myself. The result of swapping to CI is that you will do less damage compared to the life version, but I feel the build plays so much better with all this quality of life, meaning chaos immunity, infinite mana, and no need for chaos res. In the passive tree itself, now that you understand the main differences, not much else changes. In terms of ascendancy points, you take away Beda's Will, which you get in the 3rd Ascendancy, because you have 1 life. So all these Bedat bonuses are pointless, as you cannot reserve life anymore. The 4th Ascendancy isn't strong at this point, but I went with Seething Body, which at least part of the time is a 20% damage multiplier. It's too cumbersome to manage the internal flame to be above 65% at a steady rate, so I don't bother with that, but it will be that roughly a third of the time, right, this is the case, so you'll get some extra damage at least from this point. The final tree has the weapon swap tech incorporated. I'm not going into how you set this up in-game, there are plenty of videos for that. It's annoying, but yeah, it is worth it. What you need to know is that the green pathing set is weapon 2, which has a bunch of curse passive nodes, making curses extremely powerful. You bind only flammability to weapon set 2, so that every time you cast flammability, you swap to this green passive tree and it inflicts huge curses. The red tree is your main tree really, with all the minion nodes. All your other skills are bound to weapon set 1. Of course, you can set up the weapon swap tech tree before you reach level 95 or something, but for clarity I didn't want to have this in every single tree. I think it would confuse people, so it's only in the last one. For items, you're looking for plus levels for your minions because every stat they have skills with that. Scepters, amulets and helmets have levels to minions. You're looking for spirit as it allows you to summon more minions, multiplying your damage found on scepters, amulets and body armors. You're looking for energy shield as the main base defense, as that is most of your effective health, and the rest is just really attributes and resistances. For loadouts, I didn't put in much for the acts in terms of gear. That is all extensively documented in my leveling guide on Mobalytics, and I don't have an easy way to port those items into PUB right now, so you won't find items in the acts. For level 85 life-based, I imported some of the items I was using at the time in Solo Self-Found to give you an indication of the build. When swapping to CI, as we're already mostly focusing on energy shield gear, you can use similar pieces that you had before, but you don't need a life and chaos res anymore, so over time you should get pieces with purely energy shield, some resistances that are not chaos, and of course the stats I mentioned earlier. For reference, I have in total plus 9 to minion levels from gear, resulting in level 29 arsonists and even level 31 raging spirits. A special mention here to the jewels. We're using 6 in the final build, all sapphire jewels, and these provide great power as you can see. Max energy shield, minion resistances, minion damage, minion attack speed, curse effect, the list goes on. As soon as you find an upgrade, always corrupt your old jewel to see if maybe a 5th affix pops up or a great implicit. I found a corrupted blood immunity implicit, which is pretty huge for something like the Trial of Chaos. You can find attributes, resistances, so corrupt those jewels the moment you don't use them anymore. Let's talk about minion stats for a little bit. If you open up this skill menu and click the little arrow here and have your minions actually attack something in a map, all of the minion stats show up. You can select their skills, and primarily we care about the skeletal arsonists and their firebomb ability. Opening that up shows you several important stats, primarily their accuracy, which should be high enough so they hit 100% of the time, and their resistances, which ideally are capped except chaos res. Minion levels increase all of the base stats, including accuracy, their base damage, life, which is why getting minion levels is so good on this build. The playstyle is very straightforward. You cast your flame wall often and around enemies, which buffs arsonist attack and generates raging spirits. You use bone offering whenever it's available, also while mapping. On rares and bosses, you can curse them using flammability. If you get low, Grim Feast pickups heal your energy shield and your life flask does as well. I've made 2 Regex strings, which I will put in the description of the video for you to use. Regex stands for regular expression, and it is basically a string you can copy into the search bar in Path of Exile 2. One Regex string is for waystones. It highlights all the waystones that I don't want to run, which are the ones with minus max resistances, burning ground and less recovery. A second regex is there for precursor tablets, highlighting rarity and quantity of items, rare monsters, pack size and additional breaches. That's it. That's the endgame guide. There will be a written Mobalytics guide as well with this script. I will try and update the POB and the Mobalytics as much as possible when new changes arrive, and maybe even make a new video once that happens, like a new league or patch or that sort of thing. I will keep track of the changes in the changelog in the Mobalytics guide, so bookmark it over there if you want. I hope you had a good time watching this video, guys. This took quite a bit of effort, so yeah, please let me know what you think. Also let me know if you have any suggestions. Subscribe and like for more PoE SSF content. Thanks for watching and making it to the end. Love you all. See you soon. Bye bye.